That's my site plan. Now I would like to bring in the floor plan, and I want that to also appear on our presentation board, that one that's in there. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my external reference window, and I'm going to attach the floor plan. From here, I select my floor plan and I click open. It will be an attachment, scale 1:1. I do need to specify that insertion point on screen, only because I currently have something at 0, 0. I want to turn off the path. And now I will click OK. And I'm going to bring in my floor plan somewhere away from my site plan. And this is an appropriate place for me. So I'll click. And now look at this. You see the floor plan in here twice. Let's go over to the external references. And I just want to point this out. I do have it set to the tree view. Notice I have my site plan in here. It's an external reference. Inside of that site plan is the floor plan. It's nested. I also have my border, and then I brought in the floor plan completely separate. It's still the same image, but this image is all by itself, whereas this one is associated with the site plan. If I go to change my X plan, because I'm still adding windows or adding furniture, things like that, it's going to update in both places. That'll work out just fine. I'd like for my floor plan to be on its own sheet. So I go to my layout 1, and I'd like to make a copy of this layout because it already has the border and it already has a viewport. All I have to do is change the contents of that viewport. Here's what I will do. Layout 1, I'm going to right click it. And I'd like to move or copy. Click on that. And what I'd like to do is, it says move or copy selected layouts. Before layout 1, create a copy. And I'll click OK. And now when I look at my layout tabs, I have layout 1, but it's a duplicate. It has that number 2. And it's the same as this layout. And then layout 2, there's nothing there. So I'm going to, well, there is something there, but it's not relevant or not important to what we're doing. So I'm actually going to right click that layout and delete it. And I'll click OK. And now I have these two layouts. And to make sure that I do not get confused, I'm going to take layout 1, I'm going to hover over it and right click, and I'm going to rename it. And it's going to be renamed to site plan. And then I'll enter. This layout, I will right click, rename. This one will be my floor plan. Enter. Now I will not get confused. Focusing on this tab, this layout, floor plan, I can now go into this viewport and start to make some changes. I'll double click inside the viewport. And then what I'd like to do is pan the viewport so I can see my floor plan. But if I start to pan right now, notice what happens. And I know that it's happening because I locked the viewport. I'm going to unlock it. Now, when I pan, it will take me to my floor plan right here. It is still at 3/32 of an inch equals a foot. That's too small for a floor plan. I'm going to change it, and I will go to 1/4 inch because that should fit on my sheet. So I click it to 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to pan my floor plan so that it fits within that viewport. And it's not completely fitting in there. You see my decks are still, or the deck on the right-hand side, it's not completely visible. And that's all right. What it means is that I have to make my viewport bigger. Now that I have this set to a 1/4 inch, that's the scale I want. I will go ahead and lock it down. Now that it's locked down, I can go ahead and select the viewport, but I'm actually still in it. So let me double click outside of it. And now I can select it and make it bigger. And what I like to do is zoom in here, click on the viewport there, and just stretch it out to that point. Do the same thing over here. Opposite corner, click it, stretch it out, and place it right there. And now when I look at my drawing, it is fitting in there. And perhaps because I have this locked down, if I try to double click inside of it and pan it, notice how it's not going to work out. I can unlock it and pan it, but I can also do this. I can take the viewport, bring it in over here to the limits on the left-hand side. Take this viewport, and I'm going to drag it out and put it right here. Just extend it further. And I can see that my deck is right there. So I'll take the viewport and bring it in so that it fits the deck. And yes, my viewport is outside of my border right now. I'm going to fix this in a moment. I'll click right there. And then finally, I will move the viewport. It's already highlighted. I'm going to type M, enter, and then click from here, bring it over, center it on my sheet, and then place it more towards the top than the bottom. Right there. You'll notice also what happened when I grip it. You see there's a drop down here. And if I click on that drop down, I can change the scale from here as well. I just chose not to. I was using the annotation scale down at the bottom over by the drawing aids, but you can do it from here too. So let me tap the escape key. This is my floor plan. And then over here is my site plan. And my site plan is pretty much finished. I need to finish adding the sidewalk that leads from my back deck to the alley. I need to maybe put in the fence as well. You know, there's still some changes I need to make, but it is all set up. And then on my floor plan, that too is in pretty good shape. I still have to finalize some things, obviously missing some windows, which you'll put into your plans. It's the beginnings, and I can still put in my annotations. I can still go back, change my floor plan, and then it will update because it's being XREF'd here. So that's still doable. But now it's time to put in my text and also to drop in some dimensions here. Let me go back to model space. And I'm focused on my floor plan right here. And that viewport that I just put together is at a 1/4 inch scale. If I'm going to be putting it at a 1/4 inch in paper space, I need to change my scale here also to 1/4 inch. When I do that, it is going to change the scale of these annotative objects. And that's all right. I'll set this to 1/4 inch. And then I can focus on my floor plan down here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move these objects closer to my floor plan like this. And then I'll tap the escape key. What I could do is just take that scale. Let's leave this at 3/32 for a moment. That's the scale, right? For whatever reason, the ghosting of it is up here, but that's fine. I will go ahead and make a copy of that scale from here down here. Tap the escape key. Now I'll change it to 1/4 inch. And because it's a 1/4 inch, it's sitting right here. I should move it over. So let me do that. And I'll type M. I'll select it and bring it right down here. That ghosting can be problematic. I have it highlighted. I'll go ahead and come over here to the properties. Annotative scale is a 1/4 inch. I'll take that 3/32 and delete it. I'll also take the 1:1 and delete it. There. Now I don't have to think about it too much. And then over here, I'll take this one. And just so it doesn't bother me, I'm going to take that 1/4 inch and delete it. Also take the 1:1 and delete that. So only the 3/32 object scale remains. I will double click the text here and that's going to be floor plan. And then I'll click on scale, and the scale is 1/4 inch equals a foot. And then click OK. And then what I'd like to do is align that title right here near that corner of my building. I'm going to come over here, select it, and then I have a grip point right there that happens to be the origin or the base point. Take that. I will turn on my OSnap again, and I already had object tracking turned on. So I'm going to hover over this endpoint and then just come straight down like this and click it right there. Tap the escape key, and that goes away. That's the title. Now, do I know that it's working or not? Go ahead and check that layout, floor plan. I don't see the title. Might be hiding somewhere down here. So I'm going to select the viewport and just make it a little bit bigger right there. And there's the title. If I wanted to, I can perhaps move it up or leave it where it is. It's up to you. But I think it's at an okay distance there. So I'll go back to my model space. What I'd like to do is put in the dimensions, just some generic dimensions. Whoever's going to be looking at the drawings here, they're going to see the property size. And then when they look at the floor plan, we want them to know the overall dimensions. These are presentation drawings. If these were construction documents, then it would have a lot of dimensions, more than the ones I provided for you. But since it's for presentation, simple set of dimensions, give us the overall length, overall width, we're going to be just fine. Let me show you how to put that in. So I'll go back to model space here. When you brought in this block that I provided, there was already a dimension style in there. Let me show you where this came from. And I'm going to click on my dimension styles here. And this is the style that I put together for all of you to use. I'm going to come in here and click on modify. This takes a bit of time. And I realize that it's more important for you to know how to use these dimensions. And if anybody was interested in the dimension styles, I'm going to give you the overview right now. Just so you know, the dimension styles here, look at all the tabs. If I start with this first one with lines, I have dimension lines and I can pick the color of the lines. Everything that we do is by layer, but I just want to show you what the dimension lines are. I'm going to make them red, and you can see on the preview, the dimension lines are simply the lines that are going across that provides with that dimension length. I'll set this back to by layer, and everything here is by layer. This extension beyond the ticks, I've been using a 16th for some time, and that's basically just how far it's going to extend. And if I increase that, you can see how those extensions are going past the dimension line way more than they need to. So I'm going to throttle that back down to a 16th. On the baseline spacing, we don't use baseline spacing, so I've not touched that. Whatever that value is fine. For the extension lines, to see what these extension lines are, I'm going to switch that color temporarily here, make it red. Those are the extension lines that you see. And then I can have it change the colors also of line type extension 1 and line type extension 2. What are these? Well, if I suppress extension line 1, you'll see it's suppressing one of the lines. And then if I click over here, it suppresses the other. But in architectural dimensions, we don't want to suppress those. So we leave them on. And then I'll put this back to that by layer. By the way, with the dimension lines, there's also something called dim line 1. That's one side of it. And then this is the other side. But with those, we also leave them on. And then extend beyond the dimension lines, the extension lines. Watch this. If I increase that value, this is what we get. It's going past the dimension line. And that's too much. So I'm going to bring it back to the setting that I had before. And then I don't change anything on this fixed length. Under symbols and arrows, Here for the arrowheads, they're set to architectural tick mark, but look at the different type of arrowheads you can have. And again, the reason for this is because there are many disciplines that use AutoCAD. Ours is architectural, so we stick with the tick mark, but I can use other arrowheads. And interesting also that tick mark happens to be a block inside of the drawing file. Tick mark 1, second tick mark, and then the leaders, which I provide you with a leader line there. We're not going to use it, but I just wanted you to have that. The arrow size, it's not an arrow, it's a tick mark. But again, if I increase that size, you're going to see in that preview just how big we can make it. And that's too much. The setting that I had seems to work pretty well. Center marks, we don't use them a lot, so I never changed anything there. I left it alone. Dimension break, we also don't do breaks. Leave that alone as well. Arc length, leaving that where it is. Same thing with this radius jog dimension, nothing to change there, and also nothing to change with this linear jog dimension. But I did make some changes to these arrowheads. That's the lines, that's the symbols and arrows. And by the way, I usually start with symbols and arrows, and I select architectural tick first, and then I go back to lines so that I can then extend them beyond ticks. Otherwise, it doesn't work. For the text here, I created a text style and I named it dimensions. To see that, you can click on the 3 dots here with the ellipses, and then you'll see the text style dimensions. There's the font I'm using, and then it's annotative. And I left the paper text height here at 0 so that, let me cancel out, I can add the text height here at 330 seconds. And then the text color by layer, there's a fill, but we don't use a fill. I just want to show you what this would look like if we used it, but there's no need for that. And then the text placement, vertical goes above, and then the horizontal gets centered. And let me show you what happens if I change that. So instead of vertical above, if I do vertical outside, did anything change? Nothing did change. What about below? Yeah, see how that changes? It's usually above, and then horizontal is centered, but we can always pick other options. But that's not how we do things in our standard architectural dimensions. So we leave it at centered. View direction is fine. And then offset from dimension line, 1/32. If I increase that, that text is moving away from the dimension line. We don't want that. We want to bring it in and keep it close. And then text alignment is aligned with dimension line. And then fit. For the fit options here, we always want to keep text between the extension lines. And then for the text placement, over the dimension line and without a leader, meaning we don't want a line going to it. Scale for dimension features, we have annotative turned on. So that's what's controlling the size of the text and the dimensions in that drawing, in that view that we're going to put together. And then for fine tuning, we always want to draw the dimension line between the extension lines. And then finally, primary units, I had to repeat it here. The unit format was architectural, precision, same as what we've been using before. Fraction format, I set it to not stacked. It's easier to read that way. No round offs, no prefixes, no suffix. And then this measurement scale, all this is doing is it's taking the distance that you measure between those 2 points when you put the dimension in, and it's multiplying it by this scale. So anything multiplied by 1 comes back the same. So because we're drawing it 1-to-1, that's why this stays at 1. For 0 suppression, we want to suppress 0 feet. I never want to see a dimension that reads 0 feet, 8 inches, but I do want to see a dimension with the 0 after. So 10 feet, 0 inches, I need to see that. This is all we check off. And then for angular dimension, same as what we've been setting up for our units, decimal degree, 0.00. That's it. And then alternate units, we don't touch. Tolerances, we also don't touch. It's just these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs. I took care of all of that, and it's a lot easier for you to then use this instead of trying to create it. But I did want to give you some background as to how it came together. I'll click OK here, and then I'll go ahead and close. That dimension style is already set. And then when I go to dimension, I just have to make sure that I'm using that style. Over here on my Annotate tab, Dimension panel, I want to pick my HWC dimension style, and I want to make that my current style. I drew this box in, just a 10-foot by 10-foot box, so that I could at least drop in the dimensions. But I want to show you something with these dimensions. I'm actually going to move this dimension line over here for a moment. And I want you to see that this dimension at the very end of that extension line on both of them, there's a small dot. This is what we call the definition point. In your drawing file right now, if you go to Layer Properties Manager, as soon as you bring in this dimension, or as soon as you put in a dimension of your own, this layer gets created. And it will always be there as long as you have dimensions. And you'll notice that it will not plot. It's grayed out. Those definition points are simply there to calculate the distance from your first point to your second point. And then they're taking that distance and plugging it in here to the dimension. So watch, if I take that dimension and I grip it, and now I take it from that definition point and I bring it down, notice how the dimension updates. And it's doing that because the distance between those two definition points is also changing. So if I click right here, that's the dimension I would get. Not what I want to do, but I just wanted to show you the definition points. And then I also want to show you that when I grip this, I get those grip points at the definition point locations, and I also get them at the point where my dimension line and extension lines intersect, which means that I can click on it right here, and I can move that dimension line either to the left or to the right or up or down. I can place it right here in case I had it too close to the drawing. And let me tap the escape key so you can see where it ends up. And then what I can also do is I can take that dimension itself and actually move it to a different location. Perhaps it's a little too tight. So here, for example, if this was a tight dimension like this, and I'll tap the escape key, I'll move in. I can now take that dimension and move it away from that location, somewhere where I can read it a little better, and I can drop it right there. And then I'll tap the escape key and you'll see. But you have to be mindful. You have to know this. If I change that definition point again, and then I'll tap the escape key, that dimension stays at that location. In order to move it back, I have to grip this again, hover over that dimension, the grip point, and all I'm doing is hovering. And now when this menu pops up, I change it over and I click Reset Text Position. And that'll put it back where it should be, which is centered between those two extension lines and also above the dimension line. That's a quick anatomy of my dimensions. I'll take this now, I'll leave it there. Actually, no, I'll bring it back. Watch this. I'll take it and I'll just move the grips like this. That's moving the text. I don't want to move the text. I want to move the dimension line. So I'll bring it back right there. All you have to do is drop in some dimensions. And what we'll do is I'll show you how to put a dimension string and then an overall dimension. To put the dimensions, I am in my Annotate tab. I go to my dimension panel. I make sure that I'm using my style. And then if you wanted to, for the dimension itself, you see how it says use current? You could force it to place the dimension on the annotations layer every single time. So watch this. Annotations, that's where I want the dimension. If I go home, look at this. My current layer is 0. But now when I go over to annotate and I drop in a linear dimension and I go from point number 1 here, first extension line origin, to the second one, it's placing it on the annotations layer. And now I can click and I'm all set. If you wanted to, you can always leave it as use current, but make sure that your current layer happens to be that annotations layer. And by the way, the reason that layer is in there now is because when you brought in that drawing file, it brought this layer along with it. What I'd like to do is just put in a continuation. I started my dimension and I picked the left side first and then the right side. So that's my first point, and then this is my second. And now when I go back to annotate, I now want to click on continue. And notice that it will create a dimension. It starts from the extension line of the previously created dimension. So I'll click continue. And it will continue for me. I don't need to pick a first point. It just assumes that that was it already. And I'll pick this point here. And then just for practice, you can go ahead and give the dimension of your deck and just click right there. And now I'm done. So I'll tap the escape key. That's it in terms of putting in a dimension string. That's just an overall string that we need to have. It gives us an idea of the different dimensions of that building. But now I'd like to do an overall. So for my overall, I'll do another linear. Only this time, I will start here, but instead of ending at this point, I'm going to take it all the way over to this point and click. And then I'm going to take my dimension and place it above the other one like this. That dimension is an overall dimension. The other one is your dimension string that breaks down the different lengths of your building. And now I'm going to do that on the other side. And I have to be very mindful here. Let me go back to my floor plan view. It's starting to get a little tight. You see that? By the way, I also don't have the dimension in there. So I'm going to take the viewport and just make it a little bigger like that. Tap the escape key. Because it's getting a little tight, it's okay to place dimensions that interfere a little bit with the drawing. I'm going back to my model space. And I think what I'd like to do is just provide my dimension of the building here. So I'll start with my linear dimension. I'll pick this as my first extension line origin. And then I'll pick this one as my second extension line origin. I'll bring that out right here. And then I will go to continue. When I continue, picks up where I left off. I want to put a dimension right there. Tap the escape key because I'm done. I would do another linear dimension. I would start it from that same point, and then I would take it to the deck over here. And it's okay if these dimensions overlap a little bit. And I say it's okay because we have these architectural tick marks that tell us where the dimension is going up to. So there's no confusion to be had. 15 feet here, in my case, is the width of that deck. 11.1 is my building. But I still want to provide an overall. Let me put that one in. I'll go to linear, and I'll go from this endpoint all the way to that one. And then I'll simply place it right out here. 28 feet, 5 inches. Nobody's going to assume that that is the width of the deck because there is no tick mark right there. The tick mark happens to be here, and that is giving us the dimension of the deck. And that's how we know. If you were interested, if you're curious, and I'll just throw this out, you don't have to do this, but let's say you wanted to capture this extension of the building, how far it's sticking out. Here's how I can manipulate my dimensions. I would take this dimension here, I would select it. I get the grips that I want, and I'll simply pick this point, and I'll place it right there. Notice how my dimension has updated. It now reads 10 feet, but I'm missing a dimension right there. So I'll just go back to my linear dimension. I'll pick this point, and then I'll come down here and I'll pick that one, move it up, and align it to this point. Let it snap to that endpoint. That's how I can add some dimension lines, by manipulating the ones I already have in there. This is about all you need to show. If you feel like putting dimensions elsewhere, that's entirely up to you. I just want you to practice using dimensions. This should be enough. Now, when I go back to the floor plan, everything is fitting in there. And that's why you see why I had to put the dimensions there, because of the scale of my drawing. It's a 1/4 inch. I don't want to make the scale smaller. That'll work out. And then what would this look like printed out? I would do a Control P. By the way, the dimensions, the annotations, I just want to show you. That's color number 4. And that's my current line weight, 0.2. In case you were wondering. I'll cancel out of that, and then I'll go ahead and preview this. And that's what the drawing would look like. Notice, because of that hatch pattern that we placed in the walls, it really makes them pop out. And then the walls, they're on the A walls layer. We made that red, and then we've set that red to print out relatively heavy. And that's what makes this drawing pop, and that's why it helps to read it. And then the tile pattern for the bathroom and for the kitchen, notice how I made it halftone, so it doesn't overwhelm. It almost makes it appear if it's in the background. And that's nice, because if it were any heavier, it would really compete with the rest of the drawing. This is how much information in terms of annotations you should have on your drawing. My drawing, like I said before, still missing windows, and it's still missing some furniture, and that would need to get added. But I can always go back to the drawing, add that information, and because it's being externally referenced here, it would update. You can put these drawings together right now and still go back and make some edits to the floor plan and to the site plan. So I'll go ahead and close this out. And then I'll cancel this. And that's how you put the sheets together.